Let's hit that how to execute and build resilience topic. How much time do boards spend on strategic disruption? And do they spend enough time? Okay, maybe you'll start with that.
How much time? Not enough. Need to spend more time. And it sort of just goes back to this notion of stepping back and thinking how we're using our precious board time. There is a competition for the administrative and compliance and mandatory topics that we all know we need to do. I think our job as directors is not to let those and traditional kind of schedules crowd out the need for strategy. It used to be you do strategy once a year. That's arcane. We can't do that anymore. So being creative for your business and your industry, maybe we need to take a strategy deep dive on a segment every single board meeting. Maybe we need to be having more once a month or once every other month discussions with the CEO on things that are at the strategic level but keeping us more apprised. So there's all kinds of ways that we can tailor it, but I think there is such a reluctance in many ways because the bureaucratic calendar and our traditional ways of doing things. Thinking about what type of data the board is getting, thinking about what type of leading and lagging indicators the company and the board are relying on, I think there's a whole disruption there. At least for so many of my businesses and companies, the things that we used to rely on to predict and to build into strategy are like a bowl of popcorn thrown up in the air. But are we as a board sitting down and really thinking about and having a discussion around, well, what are our assumptions we're relying on? Do we need to test those assumptions? Do we need a different perspective of those assumptions? What sort of inputs on consumer behavior that worked 2, 3, 4 years ago or pre-COVID that don't work now? Are we as a board still relying on those assumptions and data sets? So how do you build resiliency? You build more quality time. You build more fluency and expertise. You build different paradigms for how we communicate as a director with the board and management. And I really think examining our assumptions in a whole new light and risking to challenge, risking to change, making it not just a dark, scary things are changing, but actually very exciting to sort of, we're in a new day, we're in a new age, we should be open. And then as directors, I think it's so important to give management license to learn and change with us. I think there's, again, that old dynamic where management has to come with a perfectly cooked cake to the board. Those days are over. If that's how we're operating, we're in trouble. On especially these type of discussions, I think giving permission to management not to know, but be co-creating with us and be willingness to bring tough questions in and half-baked cakes, I think is such an important cultural setting and tone at the top that we can help with as a director.
And I think when management comes with strategic ideas, sometimes they're a little timid to go too far. And I serve on a board where management came and said, we're going to try and do this acquisition, we're going to pay X. And the board said, if you pay X, you won't get it. And this is crucial to us. You have license, a little more leash. Go out and get this. I also think it's really important to have some of those strategic discussions, which candidly can't happen often enough, just with the CEO. I serve on a CPG board, and there's a broad portfolio of products, and some are number 1 or number 2 in their segment, some are not. And you have to think, okay, what are we going to do to get them there, or what are we going to do to get rid of them? And again, it's this preserve, create, and destroy, and it's really difficult to have strategic discussions about, okay, what are we going to stop doing or sell when a GM stakeholder or a chief of something stakeholder is there. But with the CEO, that discussion can be free-flowing and candid. And so I think to be prepared for disruption, you have to talk about it. And sometimes that means talking about it in a tighter setting. And so I think it's really important to make sure there's ample time on the agenda with just the CEO. And so often that gets tacked right at the beginning, and you've got this busy long day, and so it's on the agenda for 30 minutes, and at 29 minutes someone rings a bell and we're going to be done. Or sometimes it's not at the very end of the meeting, it's like, the plane's leaving. you have to give ample time to that if you're going to be ready to deal with strategic problems.
I just also add, I think something directors and boards can do to help the CEO is encourage CEOs to get in high-value, cross-strategic discussions with CEOs in other industries.
Yes.
So often, because of the press of the role and the CEO's calendar is just incredibly so crowded, they often don't have time to lift their heads up and think strategically. And there are some just fantastic, small, informal, cross-industry groups where, and that's just the blessing of serving on multiple boards. You see things in different perspectives, but there are some commonalities. And encouraging our CEOs to take that small but critical time in their calendar to lift their head up and go learn and think outside of their company, outside of their industry, I think is really critical.
Hey, I want to poke a bit at that, Kim. What you're describing is almost a capability to identify strategic disruption.
Yes.
And you're very deliberate in saying, hey, that capability is built by being in multiple places and seeing things differently.
Yes.
Are we spending enough time building that as a capability, and are we using that effectively to run a board?
No.
Well, I think boards can help in that. I mean, I think of my network and how different, there's some overlap with the CEO's network, but there's not a lot of overlap. And so suggesting that he or someone on his management team meet and talk with people that I've met with in Houston this week, that's going to happen just because a board can be eyes and ears, maybe that early detection for where disruption is coming, and just suggest, even a 30-minute phone call, or next time you're in Houston, look up this person. Those things help.
Yeah. We spend time in boards sometimes when you get your government affairs or regulatory update, you find out, well, who's in which trade organizations and who's president of this and who's, I think adding to that conversation, because there's sort of a natural hook there, well, what other outside industry groups are you as a CEO or you as an executive team participating in? Because there are some fantastic ones, but oftentimes we kind of make it a little perfunctory. Well, you're heading, this H&H association, or this executive's leading that. Well, that's great. That's kind of your industry. It's your cup of tea. But what else are you doing to lift up your fluency, your line of sight, your expectations on how you think about strategy for the company? I just think our executives are overloaded with dealing with the here and now and everything we're talking about. We can't expect them to have really great strategic discussions if, as a board, we don't give them that encouragement and give them some air that is part of our expectation of their time and their own development. When you look at a CEO MBO, management objectives, or you look at their end of year performance, where is that in their performance? If we make it as an ask of them, it will become very important to them. But again, I think it's just a missing component. We kind of all think, well, we'll have a half hour with the CEO. Well, that CEO's just been running from one meeting to another meeting. That quality discussion on strategy is probably not going to happen.
Fantastic. While everyone is so overloaded, we are in an environment which is changing rapidly. So I thought we'll finish with my favorite topic, which is AI. It is absolutely, literally changing every day. There are over 700 different foundational models now. You can, have a foundational model for smell. Can actually predict what the smell is based on a molecule shape. It's just unbelievable where we are headed with it. I am certain that this is a big agenda item in most boards that I've been at aren't quite equipped with their experiences to actually nail this. I was with the CEO recently, and he was with his team, and it's a very unique moment of vulnerability. He said, look, everything in my life has prepared me to be the CEO to this company. I understand refining well. I understand marketing. I've been in trading. Nothing has prepared me for the AI disruption. How are boards that you're looking at dealing with it? What are the ways in which they're getting past that blind spot?
Well, I always think that there are several ways to look at blind spots. One, you just need to be a voracious reader. You know, see what's going on, see where the next thing is going to be. If it's showing up a lot in your news feed, you got to learn about it. Second, I think that's where you get outside advisors who know it. I mean, how many people really understand AI in any company? Tech companies, probably a lot. Most of the other companies, probably not so much. And so I think advisors are there. The other thing, and this is going to sound silly, that I've found is a great learning tool are the most expensive consultants that I've ever had in my life, my children. They know what the new trends are.
They do.
And I think it's really important to use your children as a learning source. You know, if you get teenagers are really free with their advice. They're expensive.
They're the most expensive, and they are the most blunt.
They are. And, you know, then your adult children are off doing things in industries that are probably more cutting edge than the ones that we're in. And so I find they're a great source. And not everyone can plug into something like that, but I find it really useful.
Yeah. Now, I would underscore all of that. I think, in addition, language is very important to me. I think the language around the board table around AI, I find very confusing. Like, we haven't paused and understood, like, what's even a definitional architecture so that we can even begin then to have a discussion. So I just sort of encourage some of my boards and management teams to step back before you step forward, because it's really hard to have an informed discussion. I think secondly, just being very thoughtful about having the management team understand use cases and not getting just carried away like this is going to just affect every aspect of the company equally, and we all got to run, and we need $50 million and da-da-da-da-da. But to really step back and say, help us understand how you're thinking about the use cases, both from a risk and opportunity for our company. What does that investment then look like, both dollars and people? And then the really hard thing that I don't know quite how to get to, and I just reflect on about, I don't know if companies are structured in an organizational way as effective as they need to both capitalize on AI and also manage it. I mean, it can't just sit in an IT function, right? But yet that's kind of how it's currently constructed. And so if you think about the implications of AI, whether, let's just say, it's an optimization model, or if it's it has implications for how a company is organized and how decisions are made. And I think a board has some really important contributions to look at that decision-making model and that system in the company to say, do we need to think about that or help management think differently? And if not, are we either getting in the way or effectively empowering AI to do what we think it can do for our company?
I think that's a great question for a board to ask a CEO.
Yeah.
When I was a CEO and AI was, everyone's got to touch it, we had cross-functional group get together that included marketing and merchandising and logistics, and of course IT and the back office IT.
Right.
And they almost didn't speak the same language to each other. And some of the folks in merchandising said, it's not going to help us at all.
Exactly.
And they could hear things from others, and they go, oh, well, wait, if that's what it is, then we can use it this way. And so I think I would have loved it if the board had said, who's working on it? How are you thinking about it?
Right.
Bring that forward to us. Because I think it would have shown the depth that we were trying to look at it, and a measured pace that we were trying to look at it. It wasn't ready, fire, aim. It was ready, let's aim, measure twice, cut once, whatever the adage is. We just really wanted to be thoughtful about it.
If you think about that, just taking a step further, so most companies, we need a cross-functional group urgent to implement the SEC climate disclosure. Oh, okay. We need a cross-functional group urgent to now think about cybersecurity. Okay. We need a cross-functional group urgent to figure out AI. I mean, holy cow, then who's on first doing their job? Like, who's left? So I think this notion of, it's a bigger question than just for HR head or just an IT head. It is a CEO level and board discussion on how are our companies organized with all the opportunities and pressures in the current system. I understand cross-functional groups. They're incredibly critical. But if you as a director just think how many times you've heard in the last year or two that we're going to stand up a cross-functional group to address this. I also come at it from a level of accountability and clarity. Cross-functional groups aren't the best for accountability and clarity. So as a board and with responsibility for oversight and responsibility for making sure you have proper systems and proper coordination and proper calibration and collaboration, I think there's some really big questions to ask on public company pressures where I feel like every 31 days there's a new need for standing up an urgent cross-functional group with great experts, the best people in the company, so we can get it right.
Now, it's a fantastic discussion. What I've found, especially on this topic, is that a lot of attention is paid to the technology side of the problem, and very little attention, came to your point, was paid to the decision side of the problem, the people side of the problem, or the process side of the problem. And fundamentally, it is actually changing the way personas intersect with processes, or with how multiple personas connect with the process. And that is not being thought about for the most part. I've also found, and I'll get into audience questions in a minute, I've also found, traditionally you say it takes about 10,000 hours to become an expert in a domain. If you have not spent 1 to 2% of that time, 100 to 200 hours, on what is happening on AI, actually spent it, you simply don't see what it can do. You just don't get there.
That's right. That's right.
I don't know if you've seen what I describe around process and decision rights. I mean, your thoughts on that would be super, and then we'll get into some audience questions.
Yeah.
Ask the question again.
In terms of AI, is there enough attention being paid to decision rights in a company as a consequence?
No, because you can do an analysis and show a use case for AI that's phenomenal. But often the piece of the analysis that's missing is sometimes someone loses, someone gains in the short term, sometimes a different organization. So let's just take refineries or something. If every refinery has its own P&L and is optimizing only to its own P&L, that's going to give you one output. And if your use case is looking at a refinery, or a manufacturing site, or a data center, if you're looking across a system, it may mean optimizing very differently. It may mean having less or more of any of those factors. It may be X loses while Y wins, while Z cuts down, while A shuts down. That's neat on a spreadsheet. But when you actually go and deal with people and organizational structures and individual managers of those individual pieces, if the culture, if the compensation incentives, if the KPIs don't change, you will have a beautiful optimization model for whatever you're doing in AI, but you'll get often to the end of the year or the end of the 6 months and wonder, why aren't you getting the output? It's because all those really messy, trade-off, difficult people, organizational, incentive comp, KPIs, how we run the business and process, none of that's changed to match your optimization model or your AI use case.
Fantastic.